A Flash Outside the Off Stump. Episode 8. The Student Prince.
From the moment he stepped out of the pavilion, he drew all eyes and held them. No one who saw him bat will ever forget it. He was the first man I ever knew who wore silk shirts, and there was something almost romantic about the very flow of his sleeves and the curve of his shoulders. He drew the crowds wherever he went, and at the height of his cricket days the shops in Brighton would empty if he passed along the street. Everyone wanted to see him. Whenever I bowled against him, I felt as if he were impregnable. My impression was, I shall never get this man out.
Gloucestershire and England all-rounder Gilbert Jessop, looking back on his encounters with Ranjitsinhji. It's tempting to think of the cult of celebrity as a modern phenomenon, as a byproduct of glossy magazines like Hello, reality television and internet memes. When we think of Victorian sportsmen, we normally think of stiff mustachioed figures in monochrome photographs that either played for the love of the Corinthian ideal if they were gentlemen of means, or fairly low wages if they came from a humbler background. We generally assume that, although they may have attracted large crowds in the days before television and radio meant that we could enjoy sport from the comfort of our own homes, that the spectators' interest in such men was limited to their achievements on the field rather than their activities off it. But what if there was a sporting hero whose life off the field was as interesting and glamorous as their exploits on it? And what if, besides their athletic prowess, they also had the added allure of royalty? Imagine Prince Harry with the football skills of David Beckham, and you might have a rough idea of the kind of excitement that was generated by Kumar Sri Ranjitsinhji. Ranji, as he was more commonly known, was one of cricket's first superstars, catapulted to fame by a combination of sporting prowess, implied royal status, and his sheer exoticism. But behind the headlines there was a tale worthy of a film script. It's the story of a boy plucked from obscurity to become the heir to a kingdom and then cast aside before being finally restored to a throne he was never really meant to inherit at all. It's also the story of a man caught between two worlds with a foot in each, and whose position would lead him to fight for Britain on the Western Front and play a prominent part in the interwar politics of India. It's a story with a great deal of personal drama. From life-threatening injury via rumours of financial impropriety to a very unhappy love story, Ranji's life was nothing if not colourful and tragic. But above all, he is remembered as one of the finest and most innovative batsmen ever to wield the willow, and the first Indian to play Test cricket. He was born in the Gujarati village of Sarodar on the 10th of September 1872, the grandson of a cousin of the Jam Sahib of Nawanagar, who was also an officer in his army. The domestic arrangements of the Jam Sahib, whose name was Vibaji, were complicated. He had numerous wives but only one male heir, a deeply unpleasant young man called Kaluba, who was removed from the line of succession after threatening his father and being involved in a series of violent and sexual assaults, which had alarmed the British authorities. Looking for a new heir, Vibaji adopted Ranji when he was 6. He was not the first choice, but the first replacement had died in questionable circumstances after 6 months. The 6-year-old Ranjitsinhji, whose name meant the lion that conquers in battle, was described as a slim and frail boy, but was regarded as polite and intelligent, in contrast to his father, who was generally regarded as something of a drunken wastrel. That Ranji was quite different was probably down to his having been brought up by his uncle on his mother's side of the family. Having been approved by the British authorities as a suitable heir, he was sent to Rajkot to be educated at Rajkumar College, an institution for princes, where he would receive an English-style public school education designed to prepare him to rule in partnership with the British Raj. In joining the college, Ranji was becoming part of an elite group where the other pupils were either rulers or presumptive heirs to princely states. The aim of Rajkumar College was not to turn Indians into Englishmen exactly, as the Viceroy of India, Lord Curzon, later pointed out at a speech day address.
If this college were to emancipate its students from old-fashioned prejudices or superstitions at the cost of denationalisation, I, for one, should think the price too heavy. The anglicised Indian is not a more attractive spectacle in my eyes than the Indianised Englishman. Both are hybrids of an unnatural type. No, we want the young chiefs who are educated here to learn the English language and become sufficiently familiar with English customs, literature, science, modes of thought, standards of truth and honour, and, I may add, with manly English sports and games, to be able to hold their own in the world in which their lot will be cast, without appearing to be dullards or clowns, and to give their people, if they subsequently become rulers, the benefit of enlightened and pure administration. Though educated in a Western curriculum, they should still remain Indians, true to their own beliefs, their own traditions, and their own people.
A few years into his life at Rajkumar College, Ranji was unexpectedly disinherited when the Jam Sahib fathered a second son late in life. By this time, Ranji had made a good impression at school, and the British tried to dissuade Vibaji from disinheriting him. However, the Jam Sahib persisted, and Ranji was removed from the succession, although a settlement was negotiated for him whereby he was paid an allowance which would enable him to stay on at college and finish his studies while he considered how else he might make his way in the world. He was evidently well thought of as a pupil, and was later described by the college principal, Chester Macnaghten, in glowing terms.
A better or manlier boy has never resided within this college.
Ranji blossomed both academically and physically at the school, and became a talented gymnast and tennis player. He was introduced to cricket at the age of 10 by a Parsi coach, and made his debut for the school team at 11, and was captain at the age of 12. Already at this young age, he displayed a prodigious talent, scoring several centuries for the school, and accumulating a good haul of wickets as a bowler too. Despite this, he regarded cricket only as his second sport, considering his real talent to lay with tennis. In 1888, Macnaghten decided to take 3 boys to England to further their education, with the aim that they might attend university and eventually qualify for the bar or pass the civil service examinations. He selected Ranji, along with his friend Mansur Kachar and Ranjitsinhji of Bhavnagar. Ranji spent that summer with Macnaghten's family in London, and shortly after they arrived, Macnaghten took him to the Oval to see Surrey play Australia. It was the first match of the Australians' 1888 tour, and a crowd of 6,000 flocked to the Oval, anxious to see how the tourists would measure up against one of England's strongest county sides. Ranji was spellbound. It was very different to the rough-and-ready games he was used to in India. At college he had played 15-a-side in native costume, with underarm bowling on matting wickets. Now he was watching men in immaculate whites on neatly manicured grass, playing in front of an enormous and enchanted crowd. During the lunch interval, Macnaghten took Ranji to the pavilion and introduced him to Charles Alcock, the Surrey secretary and player who had recently organised the Parsi tour to England. Alcock in turn introduced them to the Australians, and Ranji spent some time chatting to them. After lunch, with the Australians struggling at 146 for 5, Charlie Turner, who was mainly in the team for his bowling, scored a century in 2 hours and received a thunderous reception from the spectators. Ranji later wrote that this was the best innings he saw for 10 years, and it was possibly at this moment that his ambitions shifted from the tennis court to the cricket pitch. For the next few years, Ranji lived in Cambridge, where he attended St Faith's School in preparation for the entrance exam for Trinity College. He lodged with the chaplain of Trinity, the Reverend Louis Borisseau, and his family, all of whom were to become lifelong friends. Borisseau had 2 sons and 2 daughters close in age to Ranji, and all of whom appeared to welcome him into their home. He was to become particularly close to Edith, although their association was to have tragic consequences in the longer term. When Ranji arrived in Cambridge, his cricketing style was unorthodox by English standards. He had a quick eye and a very supple wrist, but his game was considered unrefined by many observers. Over the next few years he would play for St Faith's, then Fitzwilliam Hall and the Cassandra Club, and was noted as an entertaining attacking batsman, but was generally felt to lack the defensive qualities requisite for top-class play. He had some difficulty breaking into the Cambridge University team, which at that time was normally filled with players who had already built contacts and reputations on the English public school circuit. As an Indian from an obscure school, Ranji had two major hurdles to overcome before he could be taken seriously. Nevertheless, he plugged away and built a reputation, at one stage during this period performing a feat which became the first of many legends attached to his career. On Parker's Piece, a busy Cambridge playing field, he once played simultaneously in 3 matches on the same day, scoring centuries in all of them. As he tried to make the leap into the Cambridge University 11, Ranji took to hiring professional coaches to bowl at him for hours at a time as he sought to refine his batting technique, particularly working on the late cuts and leg glances that were to become his signature shots. He was unfortunate to be at Cambridge during one of their purple patches as a cricketing force. It took until 1893 to break into the first team, but once there he grabbed his chance and never looked back. The 1893 season brought him to the attention of the wider public, particularly for his performance against the Australians and for his abilities as an acrobatic slip fielder. Ranji had arrived at Cambridge as an outsider, but his friendly and affable manner had served him well. He also went out of his way to adopt as many English habits and mannerisms as he could to fit into the lifestyle of his contemporaries. In this respect, he was adopting a similar tactic to another young Gujarati that he had met in London during that first summer, a young trainee lawyer by the name of Mohandas Gandhi. By this time, Ranji had moved out of the Borissows' house into his own suite of rooms in Cambridge's Sydney Street, where he became known for providing lavish entertainment. His generosity certainly brought him acceptance, but also left him with mounting debts that he had little prospect of clearing without a major change in circumstances. As he was careful to cultivate the idea that he was still a prince, his creditors were for now happy to wait for payment, in anticipation of his future prospects. Already well known as a batsman, Punch magazine referred to him as Ranjitsinhji, he was approached by Surrey, a dominant force in county cricket packed with England stars. But he chose instead to join Sussex, reasoning it was better to be a big fish in a small pond from the point of view of ensuring his regular selection to play. He was also persuaded to join Sussex because it was the team of his friend C.B. Fry. The pair had met as opposing players in the previous year's varsity match, and had immediately struck up a friendship which was to last a lifetime, taking them well beyond the cricket field to a touring holiday which somehow ended in the middle of the Balkan battlefields of the Greco-Turkish War, and a later career as the Indian delegation to the League of Nations. Sussex played their home matches at Hove, and Ranji was attracted to Brighton as his new home by its vibrant, enthusiastic crowds and Regency architecture. The Brighton Pavilion reminded him of home, and he shared many of the Prince Regent's flamboyant tastes in art and design. For their part, Sussex were already an outward-looking team by English county standards, having appointed the Australian Billy Murdoch as their captain. Although Sussex were the oldest county team, they were experiencing hard times in the late 19th century, and between 1888 and 1892 finished bottom of the county championship 4 times. Qualification rules meant that Ranji had to live in the county for a year before he could play for them, so it was 1895 before he made his debut, but his impact was immediate. In his first game against the MCC at Lord's, he scored 77 not out in the first innings and 150 in the second, as well as taking 6 wickets and 2 catches. Cricket magazine reported excitedly,
The first appearance for KG Ranjitsinhji for Sussex was something more than a success. It was a triumph. Probably no debutant in county cricket has ever achieved an equal performance.
Ironically, on the same day he played his first game for Sussex, Vibaji, the Jam Sahib, died 5,000 miles to the southeast in Jamnagar. Ranji's 150 at Lord's had propelled him into the headlines. He finished the season having scored 1,775 at an average of 49.31. His exciting style of play, combined with his exotic background, making him a massive box office draw and a journalist's dream. He soon found himself the regular subject of interviews, but must have tired of the predictability of the questions.
When did you first take up the game?
What is cricket like in India? Who is the most difficult bowler to face? Journalists were also inquisitive about his background, and seemed to be relieved to find that he had had an English headmaster at Rajkumar College, although they may have been less relieved to discover that it was a Parsi coach rather than Macnaghten that had taught him most of his early cricket. For his part, Ranji took to implying that he had arrived in England only in 1892 rather than 1888, giving the impression that his arrival in first-class cricket was rather more meteoric than in reality. He was also at pains to stress that the KS in his initials stood for Kumar Shri, meaning prince, and that referring to him as Mr. Ranjitsinhji was wrong. He also let it be known, with a considerable degree of elasticity concerning the truth, that he was the heir to his father's kingdom, despite the fact that his father had never had one and that his 12-year-old cousin now sat on the throne of Nawanagar. But for now, Ranji's star was in the ascendant. He had well and truly arrived in first-class cricket, and the best was yet to come.